Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update 189 for the Monday, 7th of July, 2025. I hope you're all well. Hope you enjoyed the weekend. Hope you're ready for an interesting week ahead. Before we start, as always, I just want to check that the technology is working fine. If you can just confirm that you can hear my voice, that you can see the slides, whether you're here in the room or whether you're watching this on the YouTube live stream, that would be always appreciated. Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Much appreciated. Listen, for those of you joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. It is me flying through as much as I can cram in into the next 30 minutes, looking at strength and weakness within the FX indices and commodities markets, looking at a few charts of interest, and then having a look at the live markets as we start the week. It is not a trade signal service. There aren't trade recommendations. It is just what I'm looking at, which might be of a benefit or help to yourselves. As always, you are very welcome here to join us, but remember that you are always responsible for your own trading decisions. And as always, if you want a bit more help and support, okay, in terms of being held accountable to move yourself forward in your trading business, you can join the Traders Accountability Group from the VTP. There's a QR code there, or you can see there's a bit.ly code, or you can just ping me if you want some more insight. Also, this week, I'll be doing a weekly update, 7 o'clock London time for Admiral Markets. Okay, their Market Pulse weekly update, just looking at global markets, looking at the dollar, looking at sterling, looking at UK stocks. You're welcome to join us. The QR code or the bit.ly code will take you there. Okay, let's crack on. Let's have a look at what's going on in the markets. Now, I appreciate if you're new to trading or if you're new to joining us, this might look a little bit overwhelming or intimidating, but it's just some snips from my own model, from my own analysis, which I do every weekend, looking for the strength, trend, and momentum within FX indices and commodities market. So what is this actually telling us? All right, so I'll just bring up the drawing tool here. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are into the 28th week of the year, starting the 7th of July. Of course, 7th of July, it's also the 20th anniversary of the London bombings. I was in London back then, and I will repost later on my blog my own thoughts about how I traded on that day. You can learn some lessons from my own experiences there. But yeah, 20 years gone already. But it is a rather eventful week. Okay, we've had an eventful couple of weeks in markets. Of course, remember that we had the American 4th of July, a bank holiday on Friday, which meant NFP was last Thursday. Those numbers were better than expected, but they were still a little bit on the low side. Okay, and it is just. Yeah, they were still on the low side, okay, but better than expected. So we will see how that plays out this week, and we'll also have a look at some of the events that happened over the weekend and how they're likely to sort of impact markets going forward this week, okay, as we switch across to some charts. But starting off, where's the strength? Where's the weakness? All right, well, Swiss franc. Excuse my drawings. Swiss franc still remains okay, top of the pile, and euro okay remains in second place there. Right there we have there, and as you can see, that's been pretty much the same for most of the last month or so, and certainly Swiss franc has been strong now for the last sort of 3 months, and it's probably a reflection on the turmoil that we have seen with regards to the sort of the tariff shenanigans that have gone, which are about to kick off again today. All right, okay. I think the US, Trump and Bessent in the US are sending out letters, okay, basically talking about tariffs and how they'll kick in. I think it's from 1st of August, but I think they all said 9th of July was the decision point. So we are likely to see some sort of shenanigans and movements over the next few days as we experience that going on. But what we are seeing is still Swiss franc top of the pile, euro second. Dollar, okay, remains bottom of the pile. But when we look at the charts in a moment, I'll be intrigued to see if that's the same by the end of this week. And Aussie, okay, Aussie still remains enormously weak as well. And probably the interesting one close to home is sterling is kind of rolling over there, right? Okay, from a month ago, it being top of the pile. Okay, we're now down to fourth, and I expect that we will see that probably accelerate this week. That would be my particular view. I think that based upon what we've seen happening in the UK, okay, in politics, etc., over the last week or so, has not exactly filled markets with confidence, and I think really they've just been found out. Those of you who've joined us all year, I've always said that the sterling strength was more due to dollar weakness, anti-Trump, anti-US trade, more so than any inherent strength in the UK. And I think that people are slowly coming to the realization of that as well. Hence why we're seeing some of that sterling weakness creep in. We're still seeing some yen weakness, okay, and also whilst the Kiwi is number three, you can come to your own conclusions as to why that is. More a case of everybody else weakening more so than I think the Kiwi offering us a strong proposition. Canadian dollars bouncing around in the middle, okay. I think that will probably change a bit this week, of course, after the sort of OPEC events. And the OPEC, I think, as their productions numbers changed today, and we'll see how that reflects in the oil market. Okay, pushed it down this morning, but we'll look at that more in a moment. Certainly, when we look at how the market has opened for this week, okay, well, we can see basically everybody's weakened against the dollar, and incredibly both Aussie and Kiwi in particular. And yen's in there as well. A lot of that will, I think, also be about the sort of the tariff conversations between the dollar, between the US and the Japanese. Okay. Neither's interest not to get a deal, all right, in that sense. So I'll be curious to see, what kind of last minute toing and froing and fretting goes on in those particular markets. This is the kind of the interesting thing, is that regardless of all those kind of shenanigans going on, we can still see that those American indexes are, they are in strategic buying, environments. Okay, STAM 1 Bravo. That's what we've seen for the last few weeks. It's why we've seen markets, hitting all-time highs. Regardless of all that element that's going on. I think I might have mentioned this last week. I'm fascinated by the fact that, equity markets are powering to new highs, whilst actually, it might be said that the FX market is looking, increasingly sort of risk off in its sentiment, but in a moment. What we're interested in is, oil has been STAM 2 Bravo. Okay, we'll see if that holds up after the OPEC production numbers today. Silver, silver has been strategic buy, but today's price action has been quite interesting there. Bitcoin, okay, whilst it's not in a STAM environment, the price action is bullish, and we'll look at that in a moment, and we'll look at how I'm interpreting that. So, not massive changes, okay, in those FX numbers, all right? No, in terms of where they are on the STAM, and certainly we've still kind of got that bullish sentiment on indexes, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some shifting and changing of that as we get towards that kind of 9th of July date. Is the can going to get kicked down the road again, or actually is Trump and Besant, are they going to take a hard line and basically just sort of get it done, and move on from that? So it's going to be an interesting 48 hours or so, I would suggest. Okay, so let's have a little look at some charts of interest. It seemed sensible to start with Tesla here, especially after the kind of weekend revelations that Mr. Musk is kind of going to set up his own political party, the American Party. It's sort of looking to offer a alternative to this kind of uni-party combo of the Republicans and Democrats. This will have not gone down well with Mr. Trump, because invariably, I think an awful lot of people who follow Trump will undoubtedly swing towards Mr. Musk. Okay, so that's kind of your sort of splitting the vote. That would be my view. I'm sure there are people more politically astute than myself who might have a different view, and that's absolutely fine. That's grand. That's what keeps the market. But of course, really, as traders, what we're interested is looking at as well. With such a revelation, what, if any, impact is that going to have on the share price? And so here we have Tesla on the weekly chart. And it has been I think it's probably fair to say it's been a rather sort of a volatile year for Tesla. We had after that really great run up there. We had a real kind of nice 1, 2, 3 top, fall back, held the 200 period moving average, and really now we've kind of been sort of pivoting around that $300 mark. But you can see in the pre-market, okay, that at that moment there, you're down $20 in the pre-market. Okay, that's probably what markets are thinking now, or taking on board in terms of Musk's commitment and revelation, etc. It'll be interesting to see that how that particularly plays out. Of course, if you're a shareholder in Tesla, after Musk said that he was kind of moving away from his Doge commitments to basically focus on the business, for him then to come out with his own political party is not going to it's going to upset people, isn't it? So no surprise to see that you've got a $20 dump in the pre-market on there. Okay, so yeah, once again, I'll be intrigued to see how that plays out this week. Okay, that might A, how that plays out, and B, what kind of kind of whiplash or commentary you get from Trump in return to that. It'll be yeah, it's going to make for an interesting week, isn't it? So whilst Tesla has been taking a little bit of a dump, okay, it's one of those tech stocks. The same can't be said for Microsoft, okay, which continues to power its way to these highs. Where they're tickling the soft underbelly of $500. That is in spite of a Microsoft laying off like 9,000 people last week, and B, your man Gates going out at the weekend talking about how big AI was going to change everything, and invariably there will be few jobs for people going forward. That doesn't seem to have had any impact on the share price, which continues to power its way higher. And this is the interesting here. Look at this. Okay, that is at the end of a downtrend. That is that was that sort of, I think it was about April 9th with Trump in the Rose Garden when he put a postponement on the tariffs. That's where we created that. What you can see there is a bullish engulfing candle. It's a bullish key reversal candle. All right, and invariably, we've not looked back since then. That was a drop. We pushed to those highs, and as we will see on the indexes, that has followed through there. But that has been quite some move, hasn't it? Quite some move. Really, really, really strong move. Okay, and you hear me say it all the time. All right, when there is a strong trend in place, off the chart at you, when there is a strong trend in place, don't fight it. What you want to do is try to find a way to ride it, to surf. Think of yourself as a surfer on an ocean wave. There is a strong trend, and your job is to basically try and find a way to join that, okay, to surf that. But that, as I said, as we've just looked at the woes of Tesla, the same cannot be said of Microsoft and a couple of the other tech stocks, okay, that have been market darlings over the last 10 years or so. But yeah, that is quite an impressive move. And then finally for this week, okay, what we're looking at, Delta Airlines, okay, why are we looking at these? There is a thin week of earnings, okay, and Delta have theirs on Thursday. They're kind of the only real name that many of us here in the UK might sort of have heard or recognised or be aware of. Me, I always keep an interest on aerospace and defence anyway, and I think I've said it before. I have kind of a soft spot for Delta Airlines in terms of them as an airline, not as a stock. I have a soft spot for them because when I was 18 years of age, I went and did Camp America, and after I did my 9 weeks of working on an American camp, I then spent $250, which got me a 30-day unlimited mileage air ticket around America with Delta Airlines. Okay, and so I had a grand old time sort of traveling all over the US. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm sure kids these days don't get opportunities like that. But anyway, so I've always had a soft spot for Delta. Okay, but as I said, my rose tinted spectacles, okay, of Delta Airlines, what they were like 30 plus years ago, does not colour my vision of them as a stock at the moment. And once again, what we saw has been a rather interesting kind of year or so, hasn't it? Having basically sort of kind of rallied hard, then invariably what we saw was as Musk's Doge team got involved, as they started cutting basically some of the kind of federal government's what should we say, kind of spending money like a drunken sailor on shore leave, and also whilst basically stopping, a lot of the making federal employees redundant and basically stopping the kind of the travel. Well, then invariably we can see that that also had an impact on basically Delta Airlines. Now, admittedly, there are other elements there involved, like some of the geopolitical tensions, but that was quite some drop off there, wasn't it? From here we are $70, okay, down at $35. Right, you've halved in price there over a couple of months. And we had been seen to sort of have a little bit of a bounce, a bit of a rally, and now I just look at us here as just basically we've just been pivoting around $50, haven't we? Pivoting around $50, and so for me, let's just clear this down. And what am I looking at? Run up to the, if the news is good, if we get some good news on things like tariffs, etc., I would like to see basically Delta getting above their sort of $52, $53, above that weekly 50. If above it, to me, that would be bullish. Then, that would be my bias. Alternatively, okay, if the numbers are poor, well, then I'd be looking for us to sort of drift our way back down to sort of $42, where that weekly 200 period moving average is. So, as you can see yourself, pivoting around 50, we shall see if the let's say the geopolitical and economic events of this week have an impact, as well as what Delta Airlines numbers are on Thursday. Okay, so you might want to just watch and see how that plays out later on this week. Okay, there we go. There's some charts of interest for you. Let us switch across to the live markets now and see what's going on. So if you just bear with me for a moment, I'm just going to switch across to the charts, and we'll take a look. Okay, so here we go. Hoping that you can still hear me. Hoping that you can see now the sort of the charts here. I've got it up on my kind of indices profile. So I've got what have we got here? I've got bang Dow on the daily, Nasdaq on the daily, S&P 500 on the daily, Russell on the daily, FTSE on the daily, Nikkei on the daily, DAX on the daily, and then oil on the daily. Why don't we start with oil? I mentioned it earlier. We've after we had a real big drop off, okay, after the sort of Trump strike on Iran, and we were just kind of literally sat going sideways. And then, as I said, those OPEC numbers came out, and we've basically just been the kind of prices just sort of knocking around there, sort of tickling $67. All right, so tickling $67. I admit, there's nothing really in there that's exciting me, okay, to get a look at. I'm sure if you're a kind of a range trader or an options trader, fabulous. But for me, it's not really doing anything for me to get totally excited about at this moment. As I said, perhaps with the kind of geopolitical and economic events later this week, that might change things. But at the moment, oil's not really, as a swing trade, I'm not hugely sort of interested in that. What I am interested in is, as I was saying earlier, is that look at the daily charts here, okay? For the last couple of weeks, bang, you can see what the score is, can't you? You can see what the score is across all of those American indexes. As I said, I am fascinated to see how we've been pushing to all-time highs at a time when the FX market is kind of almost a little bit risk off. It's a fascinating sight, and I can't sort of try and sort of tell swing traders that there are times during the year where, it is quite clear which asset class you should be trading in terms of, should you be trading FX, should you be trading, equity. And you can see there at the moment that is quite clear, isn't it? For the last couple of weeks of where the energy is, right? So once again, as I said earlier, all right, when a good trend leaps off the chart at you, you don't need to force it. You certainly shouldn't be fighting it. It's a case of, well, how do I look to surf that? And you can do that at the start of this week, but you just basically want to ensure that you are managing risk immensely tightly, okay? All right, so that if we do get a couple of little Trump hand grenades, let's say, thrown into the global economic markets, that you're in a position to manage. You can see that's what we're playing at the moment. Okay, that's where we're going. So why would I love to fight it? So we can see where all that energy and excitement is. There, it certainly isn't in the UK FTSE 100. Okay, it's certainly not. We've just looked at. You can see those American indexes, raining hard. All right. I don't think the same can be said of the FTSE. Let me just go up quickly to the weekly. We had been up to kind of earlier highs, but we're just sort of drifting beneath it, aren't we? I don't really particularly see anything exciting there. Now, once again, I think there's a couple of elements here. One, everybody's still working out, the true impact to what they saw with the Chancellor of the Exchequer crying at PMQs last Wednesday. I mean, that's just unprecedented, all right? Unprecedented, just really. Yeah, you can draw your own conclusions from it, but it's unprecedented behavior, and stuff like that does impact confidence. It just impacts confidence. People just look at that and think, what the hell's going on there? I think I'll just put my money elsewhere until I get some clarity. That's just human nature, all right? It doesn't say anything about party politics or gender or anything else. It's just, a lot of this works on confidence. And if you act in a way that basically sort of damages confidence or makes people uncertain or just stop for a moment, they just start to think, well, hang on a minute, what am I doing now? I might as well just put my money elsewhere whilst that happens. So we had that. And then, as I said, we've got the kind of the Trump tariffs this week. And, we're looking for clarity now, of course. Starmer made a big thing about having signed a deal with the US, but the details of that deal remain to be really quite seen, and we will see, whether we are home and dry this week, or whether we get caught in the collateral damage of some of the nonsense that undoubtedly will occur over the next 48 hours or so. So, I admit that those elements might be acting as a bit of a suppressor on that. If there is just great news for everybody, maybe that's what gives us the bounce up to these, 89.10, back up towards these highs. That could it, or alternatively, we get into a basically uncertainty again, and then I think you see all indices start to drift. And of course, for me, this low here, 87.15, where the daily 50 is, that would be the target there. So we'll watch that. And then, of course, as I think I said earlier, we've got GDP on Friday morning. I don't think people are expecting good numbers for that, and of course we'll wait and see. But does that basically add to kind of bearish sentiment, or does it provide us with a bit of relief? We shall have to wait and see, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly across the water, the German DAX. Let's see. Yeah, the weekly chart. The price actually. I wouldn't say it's exactly enticing me off the sideline, but I think I said all along I wanted to see it remaining above those kind of recent highs, which for the most part it has done. All right, for the most part it has done, and even when we've drifted back here on the daily to the 50, we've bounced off it and we've stayed above it. Okay, is that going to carry on? All right, is that going to carry on? We shall have to wait and see. All right, it's not enough to entice me off the sidelines to be getting long in any kind of size, especially with the shenanigans this week. But I'm just watching this. Okay, we'll see. Will that 50 continue to act as really nice dynamic support as it did a couple of weeks ago? Let's have a little look at gold and silver before we look at the dollar. Gold on the weekly chart. Make of that what you will. All right, make of that what you will. And what I mean by that is that I don't see anything there to excite me on the weekly chart. That's probably a reflection of people's uncertainty about the elements of it going. Okay, it's the uncertainty of A, the dollar, B, Trump, C, the world in general. Okay, if I go down to the daily chart, you see. Yeah, if I look at the daily chart once again, the way I look at it is that this 50-period moving average has acted as fantastic support here. Look at this, the daily 50, great dynamic support there, held on, but then basically dropped beneath it. It's pivoting around it. That 50, which has been in a really nice uptrend, is starting to go sideways. That 20-period moving average is going sideways. To me, it looks like we're just literally, we're going sideways until we get some of this. I think until we get some of this tariff clarity, one way or t'other, and from that, then we'll make our move. Is silver leading the way? Well, if we look at silver on the daily chart, in fact, no, let's go to the weekly chart. We are. Last week was a bullish close at highs not seen forever and such. But the daily chart, okay, if we look at go back to the daily chart, that is a pretty bearish, that's a bearish engulfing candle, that's a bearish key reversal candle. Now, admittedly, we're only halfway through the day, so that could change, couldn't it? But, it's, yeah, you know, you might have been bullish off these 20 period moving averages, all right, but I'm going to wait to see if we close beneath that 20 today, all right, because we haven't really had a proper close. We've closed here, but we're back above it. We've not closed for about a month or so, over a month. So I'm going to wait and see what the score is. Wait and see what the score is there with that until I get a little bit more clarity. Let's give a quick look at Bitcoin. I'm interested in Bitcoin here because for those of you who joined us a few weeks ago, I talked about now we're above 100. I needed to see us stay above 100. And if I'm honest, I thought we were putting in a lovely double top here, and I thought we were going to drift back down to 90, 85,000. But we did stay above 100. And if you look at that last week, that is the highest weekly close ever on Bitcoin. That to me, that would be bullish. That would be bullish. That is, the highest weekly close. Okay. The daily chart perhaps maybe is not as exciting, but I'm going off that. All right. I'm looking at that. That is the highest weekly close. To me, that's not bearish. All right. That'll be bullish. And so I'll be fascinated to see how that plays out. And a lot of that I would suggest would also have an impact based upon what the US dollar decides to do, okay, or how that moves in the next 48 to 72 hours based upon the tariff shenanigans. So let's have a little look at dollar now. So we'll have a little look at dollar and sterling today to finish us off. Okay, so bang, clearly the my internet connection's been a little bit slow all day and stuff. So, but we'll get there. And of course, people are going to be intrigued to see what's been going on with the dollar because, let's just go straight to the dollar index. Listen, the dollar index has been that run there, hasn't it? It has just been that down run, and I thought we might hang around in this area, but we didn't. We broke it, and we continued down. Now, last week's was, there was clearly some bulls stepping in there. All right, now it might have actually just been the bears covering their shorts. All right, they've got to be long to cover the shorts. One swallow doesn't make a summer, all right. But I'm intrigued to see when I start going down to the daily chart. We have broken these lows, continued, and I just wonder. I wonder, do we start to work our way up from here? So, for me, above this 97 level, above this daily 20, which is around about 97.40. That would give me an indication that perhaps there's a little bit of dollar respite. Maybe there'll be dollar respite based on the tariffs. But what it could also be is a pump before another dump. We've certainly seen plenty of that. Okay, we've certainly seen plenty of that over the last few months. All right, bit of a dollar pump, and then you go down. But also you've got to look at could we be riding into a bit of a short squeeze here? Okay, every man and his dog is short, and if you look at really really super long lines of support resistance, you'll realize we're at the bottom of a really really long bullish channel. So you might look at that in that particular way there. Okay, so that's a kind of the dollar there. So we've seen the last couple of days of some sort of dollar, some dollar strength there. Okay, you might say, will that hold? We shall wait, and we'll wait and see. But how's that impacted others? Well, if we have a quick look here, Euro was in a great run, but the last few days has been a bit of a drift. Aussie was in a great run, last few days, bit of a drift. Kiwi, great run, last few days, drift. Okay. Dollar Canadian, last few days, great run down, but a bit of drift. Okay. It's even the same with yen. All right. Even the same with dollar against Swiss franc and sterling. We'll look at the moment. So, as I said, the last few days has been a little bit of a dollar bounce. But as I said, maybe that's just bears covering their shorts. Maybe that's just people just taking some profit off the table as we run into that 9th of July tariff date. Okay. So you might be wanting to watch that like a hawk over the next couple of days. All right, let's finish off with a bit of sterling, shall we? Okay, so what have we got up here? So we've got cable on the weekly, euro sterling on the weekly, pound pound CAD on the weekly, FTSE on the weekly, pound New Zealand dollar weekly, pound Swiss, pound yen. All right. So we'll just had a look at that kind of dollars. So the weekly chart cable, you know, still an uptrend. All right. That's still an uptrend. Last week is a bit, I'd look at that as a bit of a bearish high wave candle. There's too much wick to either side, all right? A little bit of indecision. But a lot of that is that daily chart there, sort of drifting its way down. Does that daily 20, does that daily 20 hold? We bounced off the 50 beautifully, all right, a couple of weeks ago, gave us a real run. Is this now a case of, to me, that was a Vulcan short opportunity, but you'd be wanting to see does it close beneath that daily 20? If it does, then I think we go to the daily 50. That would be my move there, okay? And that would be another representation of some dollar strength. Certainly, we're still seeing, a little bit of the strength against the Japanese yen, or more a case of weakness in the Japanese yen. We came back to this long trend line, bounced off it, okay, and we're continuing to work our way up there. Pound against yen daily chart. That is that continuation of a little bit of yen weakness. All right, that could change, as I said, based upon the tariff talks. If I look at pound against Swiss franc, talking about this. Let's go down to the daily chart. I had just been talking, those of you who joined us, I've been talking about it, just being a risk on, risk off barometer. We have continued lower, and that is an indication of the Swiss franc strength. Swiss franc's remain top of the STAM, weakening. That's going down, but then that would also give us an indication that we're generally, if the Swiss franc is strong and staying strong, as being a bit of a risk-off indicator, which, as I said, is fascinating to see that in the FX markets when we've got equity indexes pushing to those new all-time highs. All right, and that's where we're going with that. Condos, I'm not massively fussed about them. Okay, euro against sterling. All right, bounced nicely there, didn't we? And we rallied away. And if I just look here, I'll go down to the daily chart. You heard me say that bullish key reversal up the 200, okay? Then we squeezed and we've just run up. Then we're squeezing a bit here now, right? We're squeezing a little bit here. Let's go down to that 4-hour chart. Yeah, we had a bit of that strong rally on kind of middle of last week in the 4-hour chart. Once again, the 20-period moving average acting as support until it isn't, all right? So it looks like this afternoon we might close over that, and then I'd be interested to see what I'd be looking for is basically a pop-up and then a drop. That would be a thing. And, remember, the EU has to sort of, work out its response to the sort of the tariff shenanigans as well. So, we are going to see some weakness there and that until we get clarity on that. But that would be what I'd be looking for as a scenario on euro sterling at this particular moment. Okay, let's draw it to a close there, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I hope you found that useful. Okay, I hope that's given you a little bit of help. Sorry we overrun by a couple of minutes, but it's going to be a busy week. There's lots going on. As always, make sure you're on top of your risk management. Make sure you're on top of the order flow. Make sure you're on top of the news flow as well over these next couple of days, okay? Because there will be all sorts of elements going on, okay? As always, I wish you the best of success in your own trading and investing endeavors this week. Have a fabulous week, okay? Stay on top of your game. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Trade well, everybody. Cheers.